occupies the land of the Ho-Chunk people. Please take a moment to celebrate and honor this ancestral Ho-Chunk land and the sacred lands of all Indigenous peoples. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Ms. Baumann?
Here.
Ms. Berkedal?
Here.
Dr. Garcia?
Here.
Mr. Jackson?
Here.
Dr. Jimenez?
Here.
Mr. Newmeister?
Here.
Mr. Korberg?
Here.
Dr. Sprague?
Here.
Ms. Supla?
Here.
A quorum of the Board of Education is present, so the regularly scheduled meeting of January 22nd, 2024 is called to order. We will now have the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and face the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
So tonight's agenda has previously been distributed to the board. We have a motion by Mr. Korberg and a second by Dr. Garcia, and we'll do a roll call vote on this.
Ms. Berkedal?
Yes.
Dr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye.
Mr. Newmeister?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Dr. Sprague?
Aye.
Ms. Supla?
Aye.
Ms. Baumann?
Aye. All right. So one of our first things we'll do tonight is we'll turn it over to announcement from our student representatives, Lily and Mason.
Yes, so these next 2 weeks are a bit more short and sweet. The first semester and finals ended last week, and the second semester and registration for classes starts tomorrow. As well, presented by Logan High School and the National Honor Society, the curriculum fair takes place, actually it's probably going on right now at Logan, which is introducing incoming freshmen and their parents to the classes they will be taking and their curriculum.
I don't have much for Central. Tomorrow, Central's Interact and Onalaska's Interact will be doing like a can collection competition at the boys basketball game at Onalaska High School. So all of the cans will be donated to local food pantries, and we obviously want to bring as much cans as possible so Central wins. Like Mason said, the first semester came to an end. Kind of at the beginning of the second semester, we're looking forward to what we call Olympic Week, which will be held February 5th through the 8th. And this is just kind of a fun school event that we've held each year. And basically each day there will be a different dress-up day. And then at the end of the week, I believe this is a shortened week, so it'll be Thursday. At the end of the day, we'll host like Olympic games. So there'll be there's like a scooter race, dizzy bat free throw, tug of war, things like that. And it's just kind of to help boost school spirit and just keep kids interacted. And then on the 31st, our National Honor Society will be holding a blood drive at Central all day. So if anyone feels like donating blood, I think that will be from 9 to 2.
Great, thank you. So we will move on to our showcase tonight. Tonight we're showcasing the La Crosse Public Education Foundation, and Ms. Nell Saunders-Scott is here to present.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, and thank you for the chance to share an update about LPEF with you. I always appreciate being here with all of you in support of public education. I have just a couple of things I want to highlight today that demonstrate the impact of community generosity on education in our community. As you know, LPF's Random Acts of Kindness, or RAK program, has been meeting student needs so that kids can just be kids at school for about 30 years. RAK is just one of our community's one piece of our community's many faceted network of support for students who face financial hardship. But one of the things that makes it so effective is how efficiently teachers and school staff can respond when they see students with a need. No application, no paperwork, really, and just removing barriers so that students can get to school, be ready to learn, and be able to participate fully. With growing community support for RAK, this past school year, ended in the spring of 2023, we distributed over $40,000 directly to meet the needs of students and their families. And we're anticipating even higher usage during this current school year. Of course, we're not celebrating that the need is great, but it is worth recognizing that LPF's ability to meet the need is growing because of community generosity. I also want to share a neat story about a Gold Star grant that I was reminded of this past week. About a year ago, a group of Central Biology's teachers wrote and received a Gold Star grant to purchase the book called The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot, with the plan to use that book as a unique way to present the cell unit and also discuss the ethical and moral dilemma that it provides. The project is a great example of where Gold Star grants can make an impact by supporting the creative thinking of teachers who are always planning and dreaming about how to reach and engage their students even more deeply in their learning. LPF often matches our sponsors with the grants that we give out, and this one was matched with U.S. Bank. One of our contacts at the local U.S. Bank branch was especially excited about this match because his sister is a Mayo Clinic gynecologic oncologist who has conducted research with Henrietta's stem cell line. I don't know if it's stem cells. Last week, I learned that not only will these students be engaging with cellular biology and ethics through this real-life story in the book, but they're also going to get to learn directly from Dr. Bacham Gomez, who will visit their classroom later this spring. So, of course, not all Gold Star grants result in this kind of serendipitous connection, but it's an example of the power of connecting our community to our classrooms. Community giving makes it possible for LPEF to award about $90,000 in grants each school year. Gold Star grants bring exciting education experiences to students. They support the professional creativity of our faculty, and they provide opportunity to deepen connections between schools and our community. We are celebrating dozens of grants like these at our Grants Award Luncheon on February 9th, and I hope to see many of you there, if your schedules allow. This past summer, LPEF's staff and board of directors went through a strategic planning process, as we've done every couple of years for a long time. In the coming years, LPEF will remain focused on the sustainability and growth of our core programs, meeting student needs through random acts of kindness and supporting classroom and educator needs through Gold Star grants. We're also focused on expanding our role in connecting larger scale community resources to district priorities. A big part of that process is listening with ears wide open to the needs in the district, and I want to thank staff and administrators and board members for their partnership and feedback that helps LPEF adapt and grow to best support students, staff, and schools. During our strategic planning, LPEF, our board also reaffirmed the importance of our role as a cheerleader for public education. Along with the people in this room, PTOs, other school supporting organizations, parents, and educators, LPEF is committed to spreading the message that schools are vital for our community and that community support is vital for our schools to be able to fulfill their mission. I'm grateful to all of you for your service and commitment to help our schools be the best that they can be. And I thank you for a chance to share a bit about LPEF, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Nell. Questions or comments from board members?
Thank you, everybody. Oh.
I just want to say thank you for all that you do and the foundation does. My 6 years that I got to work with the board, I was always impressed with what our teachers are doing and what they're able to do with grants, new programs, additional education, and creative things that are going on. So thank you, and thank the community for supporting the foundation, and the Random Acts of Kindness is really, that started with very minimal money, and now we don't have to rely on getting that money each year with the endowment form. So it's great for our kids and great for the community.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nell.
Thank you all.
All right, so we will move into the strategic planning phase of our meeting. Tonight we're evaluating the options we were presented, reviewing the additional information that Dr. Engel emailed to the board last week. It's also attached on this board docs site. There's a lot of links embedded in there too. So if we are referring to anything, let's be super clear about what links we're clicking on. But this is an opportunity for board members to discuss the options. If there's an option that board members want to remove from the table, that is something that we could entertain tonight. If there isn't interest in doing that yet, we don't have to.
I'd like to propose an option that I didn't send in advance because I was thinking last week while I was at the school board conference and really running some ideas through my mind, and I actually ran it past a few folks at the grocery store and the hair salon just to kind of see what the public would think, and I have been pleasantly surprised with the response. So I hope I have enough copies for everyone. If not, I would ask that you share. I'm sure I'm sending around the right things here because I got some of my own notes on. And a few of them are on.
Do you have a file to share with Scott and Juan at all?
Yes, thank you.
Could you email Laura and then Laura can?
I can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Give me a moment on
Okay.
that. You can focus on the side that doesn't have all the numbers first. Some of it's on cardstock because we ran out of regular paper. I'll send this to you, Laura. Well, maybe. There you go. Thank you. So the proposal is, the financial difficulties that we're looking at, and I know I have a lot of financial questions, and I'm not going to dispute all the numbers, but the issue that's really driving us is enrollment, and we're seeing declining enrollment, and that's less money for the district times a lot of money per student. When you looked at the 2004-05 school year to the 2018 school year, it's about 14 years. I'd gone back further, but I couldn't find the data readily. Enrollment in the district dropped by 711 kids, so we have an enrollment decline. However, in the last 5 years, from 2019-20 school year to the 23-24 school year, we dropped another 842 students. So it is concerning how we're dropping more students in the last 5 years than we did in the previous 14 years, and I think we need to look at what that's about. The backside is my attempt to start to look at that, the cohort report. What I tried to align, and if the district staff want to look at this, I checked my numbers, but they could be wrong. But I tried to align, so for the graduating class, I'll start at the bottom of 16, 17. I went back to when they were in kindergarten, which was, I can't remember now, but, so I took this, this is the same cohort of kids. So the kids that were in kindergarten that moved to first grade, second grade, so we're not comparing, because there's fluctuation. Some years there's more kids, some years there's less kids. The only trend that I noticed is really, I compared at the last 4 columns, I compared the difference in number of kids from kindergarten to 5th grade. And there's been most years a decline in that. Not sure why. The decline is a little bit greater in most recent years, but not significantly, I think, if you do averages. If you look at the change from grade 5 to grade 8, early on, we didn't, we were holding our own. But more recently, we're losing 50-ish kids a year, or per cohort, from grades 5 to grade 8. And then if you look at from grade 8 to grade 12, and again, the information's incomplete because some of those cohorts haven't graduated yet. But you could see we were actually picking up kids in high school, and now we're not, or barely holding our own. And so if you look at the total change from kindergarten to 12, and again, it's not complete because some of these cohorts haven't graduated, we were adding between kindergarten and graduation 51 kids, 26 kids, 7 kids, 9 kids, losing 6 kids. So somewhere between doing a little bit better, holding our own, and now the last 3 years we lost 61 kids, 26 kids, and 57 kids. So, I don't think this is all about birth rate, and I think that this is just telling me we need to dig further to figure out what this is, because if I knew what the answer was, I'd tell you. But it's just, this tells me that there's more than birth rate. However, there's a declining birth rate. And we have old buildings. And Our oldest buildings are Polytechnic, built in 1995. Hogan, built here, is 21. Longfellow Middle, Logan Middle, and Emerson were all built in 1939, and Spence in 1953. So my proposal is, I don't like the idea of closing schools. My idea is to consolidate, again, as I mentioned at the previous meeting. So, but then as I kind of thought about chain effects, and you know, Juan made some really great comments at the last meeting about property. So the proposal is a chain of things. So Polytechnic, move them from downtown into a high school building. I don't have a proposal which one. I don't have a proposal on the cost, but it's a place to start. I think it's a better education for the students in with other students. And then move Hogan staff to the Poly building and doing our business in the downtown business district. There's some good thought to that. Then build a new elementary site here on the Hogan site that would consolidate Emerson and Spence schools. That way we're not closing any schools. We're keeping the cohorts of the schools together, the staff and the students together, bringing them here. We'd be blending cultures of the schools. Those are our two oldest elementary schools, and those buildings would then go. As far as, you know, one of the big things we really heard, and I've heard for many years from the Emerson neighborhood, is they love their school in their neighborhood. And I think we're about 10-ish blocks, this property here is about 10-ish blocks from the Emerson site. So we're still close to that neighborhood, at least maybe even less than a mile. We're still in the neighborhood, and you know, we may need to look at, is this site big enough, I think is the question. Could we purchase additional property? Do we build up? Is this a viable site? I'm not 1,000% sure, but I think it warrants exploration. Then I would propose on the Spence site, where we have a lot of property, to build a new middle school, because both of our middle schools are built in 1939. So to build a new middle school there. And this proposal, I think, would cost around $90 million. I've talked to some folks in the engineering field. Again, this is a ballpark number, but that's as best as I can tell you. That leaves then the only old building we really need to look at is the middle school on the north side, Logan Middle School, which is built in 1939, would be something that would have to be resolved, I would think, in the next several years. The location of how to do that would need to be determined. This would avoid closing any schools and honors the cultures in each schools and bringing them together. It updates all of our oldest buildings, except for Logan, which will need to be addressed, and Poly, which was recently renovated, and doesn't require the purchase of any property. In fact, it leaves us with a nice space where Longfellow Middle School is right now. So it's a big proposal. I think there's a lot of moving parts to that, and the 90 million wouldn't include any demolition costs or anything like that. But I think it's a big idea, but I've bounced it off a few people in the community. I've received good response. People really like the idea of consolidating and thinking for the future rather than closing. So that's
Thank you,
just
Ms.
another
Supla,
thing.
for your work on this. I think, so this one mirrors a proposal that we have, I can't remember what option it is, that does the Emerson, Spence to Hogan.
Yep, I
but
started with that one, and then I kind of built out on
So
both
the
sides of
two
that.
new pieces to that is Polytechnic
And the middle school.
and then the middle school piece. So we're reducing a Poly building and one elementary school. Is that correct?
Consolidating
Same number of
Emerson and
other
Spence.
buildings.
So the Poly building would be reused for the Hogan staff. I don't know if all Hogan could fit in there, so I think that's a question. I think the question is, can an elementary school be built on this site? This is ideal site. I don't know if it's big enough. That's my only big question. So the Emerson space would be then not used, and then the Longfellow space would not be used. But again, what we choose to do with those, I think, based on the conversation last week, I'm not proposing anything at this time. I think I don't know the answer, because again, we want to be really smart before we dispose of property and dispose of, Juan's comment at the last meeting about how hard it is to find property in the city just really is so, so true, and I totally agree with that.
Okay, so I guess at this point, I would ask Dr. Engel to do the math numbers on this for how it would, and if it's not possible to do it in this 20 whatever minute time period.
Come on.
That's okay, we can always discuss it further.
Yes,
at our
I didn't,
next
I
one.
kind of threw this, again, I didn't send this in advance, and I apologize, but it kind of, again, my brain got working last week, and I started putting the pieces together, and I kind of wanted to talk to people in the community, because if people were like, that seems like a big price tag, we couldn't do it, but I was
Yeah.
really getting a good response, so.
Yeah, and I think, all of the options we consider should have the end goal of setting our budget up for the next couple of years. So that's why I want Dr. Engel to run the numbers so that we can look at it and say, if we did this, what are our operational savings? We know there would be some capital expenses we would have to go to voters for.
Mhm.
But operationally, the whole discussion is we're looking at ways to balance the operational budget. So if we can't meet that, then we'd have to find savings somewhere else. So that's why I want him to do that on whatever reasonable time frame is for you. So thank you. Okay. So it does sound like there are some board members who have considered the consolidate through referendum option. Do we want to start there, kind of bridging from Deb's proposal, looking at some of the other options that have that as a piece?
Good a place as any.
We own the discussion, so we could do whatever we want.
Well, I'd like to set this down, at least what I'm at least willing to start with, right? So I think a lot of us have at least a place where we're like, all right, I'm good with these pieces. And there's kind of that broader thing where that's where the discussion's gonna come around. And I think try and harmonize where we feel like we're willing to start. I think Deb's plan and some of the plans we've already seen all have bits and pieces of that. At least for me, Southside consolidation and lack of the least amount of disruption is where my head's at. So we have a lot of facilities on the south side. A lot of them are older. And the north side's only got, and the way I view this, and this is part of the discussion I want to get to, because to me it's stages. Let's talk facilities and let's talk about the impacts to our students. What would we be serving in those? What would the process be? And then also redistricting as it goes, because to me it's what are we feeding into Logan Middle, Logan High, and also what are we feeding into Longfellow? Those lines have to be the same. Right now they're not. Emerson actually splits. So Emerson's a split school. Ferry Street North goes to Logan. Part of the Emerson district then would go south. So that was part of the reason I didn't like Lincoln, is because as a middle school and a bonding part of a child, experience, they would split then. And my kids were in that, so we would have split. We missed that because I had one at Poly and one was a fifth grader. But when they closed, that was one of my big trepidations as a parent was, if they form bonds and their best friend is going to go to Central and then they're going to go to Logan, what's that going to do to them? So I don't want that to happen as we talk our way through this. Whatever solutions we come up with, I want that to be pretty clean, as these schools are going to go to Logan through that chain, these schools are going to go through Central to that chain, and whatever we end up, I just want to make sure that that's kind of the discussion we have, because that takes some of that social anxiety for our kids and our parents out of that equation. So as I said, I think there's some efficiencies in the south side, but I'm really focused on too is whatever we do, everything we hear from our teachers and our staff is we don't have enough help. So as we set up that budget for the future, I want to be conscious of, I'm willing to have bigger, broader discussions if that's willing to set up our teachers and staff who are supporting our families and our students with enough resources. Because every linkage I sit through, especially on the elementary level, is they're taxed.
Yeah.
They're struggling.
More people and resources.
So, long-winded intro for me, I feel like there's some opportunities to consolidate Spence and Hinchin into Hinchin. I think Spence is a great site for something in the future, whether that's a new elementary, a new middle school through referendum. I'm concerned about the numbers. If you look at building capacities, you can't just take Spence and just move it to one. Spence is 316, I believe, if I'm reading everything right. I might not be, hold on. Yeah, 316. 316 students right now. So getting 316, there's no one-for-one
you can't put those into Hinchin, you can't put them into somewhere else. So if you look at that, it'd probably be shared between Hinchin and Hamilton. And that's okay, the way the boundaries are. There actually some will be closer to Hamilton anyway. It's a closer school for them. Some will be closer to Hinchin, which is the way the boundaries are sitting right now. So I would be okay with starting with that discussion is where I would be on the elementary side in the short term. I agree, moving Poly to me, I would split it because there's a middle school and a high school. So I would have the middle schoolers move to one of the middle school, similar to the way Soda 2 is. They're a separate school within a school, as well as moving them to the high school. There's a lot of awesome things about Poly. The way they structure their learning is very cool. The project-based learning is awesome. I think where I struggled was I don't think there was as many opportunities for arts, for music. They don't have that. Trying to put a band together with 100 kids is really, really hard. So this would allow them the opportunity to have, what elementary schools would call specials, the ability to get into be in an orchestra setting, a band setting, choir, and have that full experience, but still have their learning curriculum be around what they do. So like Deb, I don't think I've thought my way through where, but I would move the community-facing resources from Hogan to that site. It's great. It's newly renovated. It's basically gutted. And it's to me a great experience from our community to go there to go do that. And I would take whatever is what I would call student-facing administration and put them in one of the buildings, whether that's Logan High School, Logan Middle. We have space in a lot of those, or disseminate them. Really, it comes down to what's the easiest way for Dr. Engel to work with his team. That's their call. But to me, I would like the student-facing administration to be as close to our students and our building administrators as possible, to be connected with the challenges they're having. So I talked about Poly. The issue if we move students into Hamilton, if we did have to split and talk our way through some of that, is Soda 1's there, which is taking up half of the building. So it'd be what would we do with Soda 1? What would those parents feel about moving to a different location to free up space? It's a community school, so if we did have, Hamilton is, so we'd have a lot of resources around there for families in those neighborhoods, which to me is a big positive. The only other thing is, like I already talked about, some of the redistricting. So I would remove the 2 islands. We have 2 islands right now in the way we're set up. And we have a State Road Island and a Spence Island. I'd eliminate those islands and put them close to the community school. So I think it was State Road would go to Hamilton, that island there, which is towards the downtown area. And then the Spence Island, which is up on the ridge, would go to State Road. The only thing I would say, we've talked a lot about Northwoods. Northwoods is a great school. IB is a great curriculum. It was primarily a choice and boundary school. I would look at that in the future as an option to, especially with Soda moving. Is there ways that you could move Montessori or Soda, and I think a year ago was one of the proposals that it is a choice-only school. Based on the map on where a lot of the Northwoods families are coming from, they're already making a choice anyway. Whether that's in our district or outside of it. But I think we'd have to talk our way through that. That's not an immediate discussion for me. But I would want to leave Northwoods as it is and keep the IB program intact. I don't think it's movable.
Okay, so
So
just to
there's a
clarify.
lot of stuff there.
Yeah,
And
I was
I
trying
can
to take
type all
notes.
that up. That was me
I was trying to take notes while you were going.
writing
'cause
notes as I was sitting here. So
This is another option that differs from what we had presented before, but
Mhm.
has some similarities.
it does.
So I also want Dr. Engel to run the numbers on this one and let us know if it meets the goal of balancing the budget, and then if not, like what else would have to be considered.
So right now, mine would be consolidating one school or 3 schools into 2. I would potentially look through referendum to put a new school on Spence, and then consolidate all 3 into Spence.
Okay, so your proposal is not to move Spence students to Hinchin. That's a temporary piece
That would be a
to build
2-year
at
to 3-year to
Spence.
build our way through it.
Okay, so this is a
But it's a-
referendum.
That, to me, it's 2
Consolidate
parts,
through.
right? I think it's sustainable to move them based on where they're geographically located. If the community will not support a new site, then it's there. But
So you have Plan A, referendum passes.
that's how we roll, man. Multiple
Plan
plans.
B is the boundaries
Yep.
are.
And I'll
are
type all
the
this up so Dr. Engel
Okay.
has it.
And when you type it up, you'll email us so that we can do the thing. Well, I expect, thank you.
I'm curious, is there a reason the potential rebuild, either Deb in your plan or Jeff and you're talking through, is there a reason the referendum for potential new build on the Spence site, whether it's middle, elementary, whatever, that sounds like 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road. Does that have to be built in if we needed an immediate referendum on consolidation?
It probably depends on where, because I think if there would be an immediate referendum being around operating. Because I think, to me, you have to build community support. And I'd want community engagement in the transition process, and something that the board was, whether they formed a committee on the board, have the stakeholders from those 3 buildings or 2 buildings, and as well as PTOs or whatever it is, to talk through the pros and cons. Because there's risk reward in all of these. There's, whether that's the way they serve their students special ed, or the way that their students get free lunch or meals, like what's that? That's a risk in some of these if we are going to change the mix of those students.
Yeah.
And it's a real part of the challenges they face in buildings. So I think we have to look at that. So I think the way I view this is, depending on how we land on, can we balance our budget through what we in the community are willing to do? Would you have to put an operating referendum out versus a building referendum, a capital referendum out to really
That would cover the whole phased plan that you're suggesting.
Correct. But I think, to me, that's a like you said, a 2-3 year discussion. One, we're gonna have to get it budgeted out. You have to have a design phase done on this, and then that's gonna take a year. One, we have really crappy interest rates too. So if we can allow some of the economy to catch up, and we're gonna see some deflation over the next couple of years, that would help us from a borrowing standpoint. So to me, I'm playing the long game potentially.
Okay, so I'm going to ask one more clarifying question.
No.
So, close Spence, everybody goes to Hinchin. Build at Spence, close Hinchin. You said 2 schools, maybe 3.
So the way I would do it, I would take Spence and I would split it between Hamilton and Hinchin right now. And I would work that geography and make sure that whatever we do in the long term, and then if the community would support it, because that's a sustainable solution for the future as well. If the community would support a new school, now I'd take all 3, Hamilton, the old Spence, and Hinchin, and they would go into the new school on Spence's site.
Okay, so you're also proposing Hamilton closing then?
Correct.
Okay.
So if
So
the
that-
community would do that, yes.
You got that? Okay.
And what about Hogan?
Hogan, so my concern with Hogan, and it's one, the physical size of the site, because I thought of the same thing, Deb, and my concern with Spence and Emerson is they would split again, right?
Yeah, and
Based on boundaries.
that's a downside to my proposal.
And that was my concern when I saw that one was, I didn't mind the thought, because to your point, we're taking 2 of the oldest buildings. I just didn't want to split them unless we were willing to talk about a boundary change, a bigger boundary change, which I think that would really move people that were truly south side, really close to central, flowing into it, or vice versa, right? But I think this site is pretty small. We would have to go up. And 2, I think unless we are already starting those conversations with the city, I wouldn't want to have the same, this was potentially a historically designated building. So I think we would have to have some pretty upfront conversations early with the city to say, this is what our plan is, this is what our hope is. We've talked to the community, because that's a longer term process as well. So.
I'm optimistic on that. Would there be an option, again, I'm just being real optimistic that the community could support a building referendum. Would your proposal include an option? I mean, and I don't know if the Spence site allows it, but when we built Franklin, we actually had the Franklin school open and built next to it and then took down Franklin. I mean, that might be an option too, in terms of not having to split kids up.
And you could potentially do it, build half the school, talk with my hands. You could build half the school, have kids still in Spence, and then potentially move them and you could do a phased approach. It probably costs a little bit more money to do it that way, because you'd be managing that, but that's still a potential as well.
So we will run the numbers, and then in our next meeting, first meeting in February, we'll look at how those numbers balance out.
Well, the numbers
There's board
include
interest.
capital improvements that won't be occurring then, at least that are kind of planned for the next several years.
I guess the thing that I'm most worried about is the operating budget. Like, I only want to do changes because we have to, you know what I mean? Like, and so the changes must balance our budget and set us up. So that's kind of like the hierarchy of needs as we look at all these things. Like, I only ever want to close a school if we must. right? So I want to make sure that if we're proposing all these things, they also meet the needs of setting us up for success for the next couple of years. That's why I want Dr. Engel to do the math.
We haven't included deferred maintenance in any of the savings because it's anticipated cost, it's not known cost, and oftentimes a roof goes an extra 4 or 5 years, or boiler lasts 10 years longer than you anticipated, and so we haven't calculated those because those aren't budgeted numbers, those are anticipated needs in the future, and they certainly reflect largely in how we manage our buildings in the future, and you want to get rid of deferred maintenance if you can, but in terms of like actual savings to our school district, they're not in the budget right now. It would be hard to factor those in as like actual savings.
It did, I mean, to tail on, Deb, I really liked the way you brought the middle schools, and I know it was kind of outside of the scope of my thinking, but you could potentially, if you did something like that, and I'm thinking out loud here, so just bear with me. I mean, Longfellow is large enough to easily put three elementary schools. Is it set up for it? Is it an old building? Yeah, I mean, there's still drawbacks to that, but potentially building a new middle school onto the Spence site and then replacing that middle school with Longfellow, whether that's an updated Longfellow, as part of a capital referendum, you could potentially then consolidate 3 of those, Hinchon and Spence and Hamilton, into what is on that site. Again, I don't know where those numbers will look like, or if that's even the right thing from an educational standpoint, because that's something that's well outside of my scope. But you could also work through a few of the same end results with building that we already have as well.
My concern with consolidating that many elementary schools into one site is the number. It does go outside of that kind of best practices that we've been introduced to about the ideal size of a school. And so I think in the same way as the boundary changes, that's the kind of consideration to make.
Okay.
All right, I want to make a proposal for an option to remove. I want to remove the do nothing.
Please.
Second.
That's out there to illustrate to the community where savings would have to come, like the realistic ways that we would have to find savings in our operating budget if we did no closures. So I wanted it to be very clear that the only reason the board is engaging in these discussions is because the alternative is not great. So that's my first option I want to take off. And what I had kind of talked about with Laura and Dr. Engel was that we would do, like, we'd vote off options, so it was really clear that the conversation ends on those options when they're removed.
Are we going to ask for unanimity on that?
I think majority is what we do. I think it'd be super,
It could get very slow,
Yeah.
very fast.
right, I think, this is what I hope we're unanimous. We'll find out. So, as a president, can I make my own motion? Can I motion? Is there a second to remove the do nothing option?
Seconded.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote on this since we have online folks.
Who was the second on that, please?
Dr.
Sprague.
Thank you.
Ms. Birkenhoff?
Aye.
Dr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez?
He said.
He said
I
aye.
see you say aye. Mr. Newmeister? Dan, have we lost?
He said aye as well. I think.
Okay, yeah, I see you.
Assuming the lip reading.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Dr. Sprague?
Aye.
Ms. Sukla?
Aye.
Ms. Baumann?
Aye. All right, so we've removed one option. We've added 2 more. Good job, guys.
That's progress.
We actually also have 3 because Dr. Garcia proposed the do everything option, which might be a good segue. We've removed 1, we've added 2. Let's talk about this other one that we brought up last time. So if you want to, sorry everybody. I don't think that was me. It might be. An echo chamber, isn't that funny? Okay. If you want to, in board docs,
There's echo from the,
is it the speakers?
it's an echo from who's online.
Oh.
Well, they're muted.
Better? Better enough, okay.
Better?
We're going to look at the document attached in board docs, where Dr. Engel has included the do everything, which I believe is.
The links aren't.
The embedded links in the document?
Yeah, in the document, but when I click on the links, it doesn't go.
Are you authenticated in, or did you go,
I was able to open them this weekend, but I just tried and it didn't click this time, one of the blue links. So within the document, like 13, if you try to click on those, they're not clicking. Okay, while we work on that, and I have my echo voice back, we'll talk about number 11 on this document, which is the do everything approach. Is it just this? It's just me? Okay, we'll just go. I'll project. So it looks like if we did everything,
And what does do everything?
so this would be, from what I understand,
Yeah, I asked for, and I think this is what has been delivered here, like if we were to make sure there was a special teacher in every subject, if there was a sped teacher and TA on every elementary campus, like the people who are split, if they were just full-time positions, funded at all those. And if we looked at like what needed to be done for the buildings to bring them forward or to do them maintenance, this would be the tax impact of that. Is that right, Dr. Engel?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you want me to read what that is? Or say what that is? Yeah, so, I mean, it looks like an additional $4 million in an operating cost, and that would be for salaries for staff, for specials and special ed, and all the people that we've got sort of split between campuses right now. And then $2 to $6 million in capital maintenance. I don't know if that's annually or if that's a one-time. So the $2 to $6 million is a one-time, would be a one-time referendum, I guess, to try to get the buildings brought up comparable or repaired however they needed to be. And it would be a tax burden of $134 to $148 annually on a home worth $200K. So $12 a month for the length of the referendum. I guess, I mean, what's noted here too is that if you bring it out over a 20-year period, it would amount to $80 million, and we could build 2 new elementary schools maybe in the same time frame. Like, what opportunities would we be missing to really replace or upgrade facilities in a meaningful way if we were to prioritize sort of keeping the combination of neighborhood schools and choice schools that are within driving range of all of the people in our geographically odd school district. Did I get that right?
yeah.
Sure. No.
Are you bringing another option to the table? No. Oh, you're allowed to, but let's talk about this one first. Comments from board members on this option. I guess one of the fears I have is,
It
So-
wouldn't pass.
well, if it didn't, then
Yeah,
what?
yeah.
Then we're like in a situation.
Then we're in do
of-
nothing, exactly.
or-
No, I
or work
recognize the
quick.
risk of it, and I don't even know, yeah. But I felt like at least knowing seemed like the
Yeah.
range. I don't know, it was worth knowing the continuum from do nothing to do everything.
It's actually less than I thought it would be.
It is too, less than I thought it would be. But maybe more than, I don't know.
I think there's there's some intangibles that we lose as well. We've heard a lot over the past couple of months. Is that a hand raise, or is that a bright idea? Or
I'm not sure what it is, but I did see that Mr. Neumeister had his
Oh.
hand raised.
Scott, you go ahead first.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Okay. I think there's at least something to be said about looking at what you just had mentioned, because at least we'd have an idea of either the cost savings or the cost period to of that option. So even if we shoot it down the road here, it would be an opportunity the everything part of it.
Can we take a minute and try to fix our tech issues?
Yeah. Let's take a 5-minute break to try to fix the echo.
Sounds like
All right. So I guess do we want to continue Meredith's do everything discussion more? Do we want to table it as just something to hang out there while we discuss?
I wouldn't mind thinking about it more now that I have some of these numbers too, right?
Mhm.
Like, I don't know.
So to clarify, that would include an operating and a capital referendum to do that? Okay, that's gonna be real clear, thank you.
So it is politically risky since we have an operating
Aren't they all?
referendum and they are, yeah. What I would love is one that
Well,
just like,
My question with that one is, do our problems come back in 5 years?
when the
When
referendum
when the
ends,
referendum's
we're
done,
back.
to where we
Yeah.
are.
Okay, so this brings me to my question, which is based on an email we got from Jed Olson, which is asking about the assumption that enrollment will continue to decline forever, which it can't, because then we'd end up with no students. Like, at what point do we expect enrollment to level out?
Yeah, so as Ms. Sukla pointed out, we have declining enrollment from grade to grade, and the incoming kindergarten classes are smaller than the senior classes. But assuming that enrollment stabilized, like some things changed, and our grade levels stayed exactly the same, and our kindergarten classes and 4K classes stabilized at their current level, we saw the same number of kids coming in each year, we'd be looking at 12 years of declining enrollment in order for those classes to move through, and the kindergarten classes, which have then stabilized, to kind of flatten out that trajectory.
Okay.
So if nothing changes, and the one thing that changes is birth rates and people stick around instead of leaving, then we'd be looking at 12 years of declining enrollment.
I think that's why, again, the cohort report, something is different, something is shifting, where kids that start in kindergarten aren't sticking around at the rate they were before. And I don't know why, and I don't think anybody in this room knows why, but the decline in enrollment is much sharper the last 5 years. I don't think it's related to any individual or any particular thing. COVID contributed a little bit, but each year the numbers are pretty similar in terms of number of kids that are not here in the third Friday count. So I think we've got, I mean, it's been 5 years of this. I think we can turn this around, or at least figure out what's contributing to it, so then we can figure out if and how we address it.
I would venture to guess that some of the driving factor behind that is a lack of housing stock and rentals available in La Crosse. The rental availability has been around 2% for several years, which drives a lot of families out of district if they need to move, or there's an eviction or something like that.
I'm happy to commission a deeper analysis there and look at some enrollment experts in the area and see if there's a way to get a deep dive into what that might look like.
I think that would be interesting and very insightful. I think I want to seize on that. The assumption about, you know, when and if enrollment will stabilize and in fact reverse. We ultimately can't know. Our projections may very well be borne out, and there's obviously a host of reasons for why it's happening. And it's not just any one single thing, but we are limited in what our responses as a local school district can be to it. There's only so much that we are able to account for and plan for. And that actually, I want to bring that back to a point that Mr. Jackson made a number of meetings ago about our approach and our tone in this whole process. And we've been hearing obviously a lot of anxiety and a lot of frustration for a number of months, both from the public and from public speakers who've joined us. And I think in conversations, there is a lot of that anxiety, but I think it's important to remember that one of the levers that we have to pull as a school district to think about how do we stop this, how do we turn this around, how do we make something good out of this, is that this is an opportunity for us to do that, to make something really big happen within our school district, which will potentially draw people back in. What I was going to say before we broke for the tech issues was some of the intangibles that potentially the do everything model doesn't help us address are the kinds of things we've been hearing about the Northside Elementary School in particular, the way that it is a draw for our neighboring districts, for the people who live in the communities surrounding us. And we have an opportunity to find a way to capitalize on that and create further draws within our district, and to help as much as the school district can stabilize what has been happening in the larger community of La Crosse. That's what I would say.
So there is a risk in the do everything, right?
A big one.
Well, and I think it's a danger too, to just like, I mean, part of what we've struggled with is that these problems didn't spring up overnight, right? And we've delayed action in lots of different ways, and this is another way of delaying action, and I'm not sure that's the right course to take, so.
One of the things I appreciate most about both Ms. Sukla and Mr. Jackson's proposals, as I understand them, is they're very forward-thinking about all of the buildings. We see all of the ages and thinking, there's only so many times you can renovate a structure, right? There's only so much you can do to bring it up to modern standards, to allow it to operate to the highest educational standard that we hope to attain to, right? And so phasing things out in a reasonable, a logical way that allows us to replace what we have, right, and hold on to the benefits of what already exists, and to grow and augment from those, I think that's the opportunity that we have.
So with our do everything, and Dr. Sprague noting the risks and the limitations, right? Because you can't be as innovative in the system that we've had, the footprint we've had for the last whatever years, right? This would commit us to that same setup, same schools. Deferred maintenance would happen to bring that, right? At this point, with those comments, do board members want to keep this one on the table? Table it? Or remove it?
I think until personally, until I hear from every board member kind of what they're thinking, I'd like to at least keep it on the table. It's probably on the bottom of my list, but I think I think it should at least stay on the table. I suspect it will probably be removed sooner than later, but I'm not quite ready for that personally. I'd personally like to hear from other board members what they're thinking about this whole thing in general.
I think for a plan like that to be innovative, we would have to think about, like, what if we had K-4 at all the elementary schools? Would that boost it? Like, there are things you could do to innovate on the current footprint we have, but I don't know that we have the funding or the state legislative political will to make those happen. And when we went to the convention last week, you know, at the school that we went to, what we saw was lots of grants, lots of retired teachers asked back for special projects. You know, schools that are really innovating in that way are doing maybe the creative options that some of our community members have come forward and said, have we tried every creative option we can think of to solve this problem? And I'm wary of that because in my experience as a teacher, the creative option usually means that the teacher is doing more work, right? And for not any more pay. And so, I don't know. I wanted the plan in discussion, but I am also, like, I understand its flaws, if it needs to be.
Juan or Scott, do you have any
I
thoughts?
get
We
it.
can table it if people don't have any big feelings about it, that's totally fine, but.
I don't mind maintaining that idea on the table. I think it's worth having that conversation, seeing what all the options are. I think the do nothing, removing that was the right decision to make. I'm also a little concerned about adding Polly to the conversation here. I mean, we have heard repeatedly from families about Northwoods and Ivy and how that is so critical to student learning, yet here we are talking about Polly that uses project-based learning, and we really haven't heard from them because I don't know that they recognize that they could be on the chopping block. So that concerns me greatly, that we would be including that building in a conversation. without really thinking that through. So I think that that would be a major concern of mine to do that. I mean, I like Ms. Supla's idea. However, as Mr. Jackson noted, the concern about the historical designation, and that's already was a thorn in our side with the Lincoln site. That could blow up that whole situation. Even though I'm totally for that idea of combining Emerson and Spence at the Hogan site, I think that that could be a major concern as well if that were to be a rug that gets pulled out from under us. So there's a number of things I think we just need to be very cautious about and wary about, and be careful about how we're thinking through things and maybe giving credence in one area, and only because we find it to be a viable option in our eyes doesn't necessarily mean that it is.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the Polytechnic, because I don't know if anybody was on the board when we bought that, even though we bought it maybe 5-6 years ago.
19, I think.
But it says it's probably the oldest building, but it's the newest building.
Yeah.
We just dumped how many millions of dollars in there? I don't say the word dump, I mean we put a lot of money into that project, and it was put there for the location was selected for a reason. It was selected for downtown, where students going to project learning could do projects in the community in those neighborhoods, and they've done that. They've worked with downtown Main Street. They've worked with, a lot of the businesses, a lot of the bakeries down there, other kinds of law offices. The list goes on and on. Now, that being said, I do get some credence of that possibly that might be more of a middle school model, and there might be a look at, should the high schools ages be in one of the high schools, because then they would have their more extracurriculars, the band and those kinds of things. But I'm not at all sold on saving $500,000 and upheaving those lives and giving them, basically remodeling the building again for administrators. I think that's a bad idea. I kind of will dovetail on both the things that you talked, Deb and Jeff. I've thought more too. I was thinking about, I think Spence is probably our building that's probably the worst shaped building. Some of the other buildings are maybe older, but I think their structures are better. In fact, so I'm thinking that I would like to see kind of going to Hinchin and Hamilton, with that being put up as a site for a new elementary school. The proposal that has State Road and Hamilton, and that the students would add onto those buildings and go, split those up. I'm not attuned to that. I think that makes those elementary schools too large. It kind of leaves a hole in that area of the neighborhood. And so I would kind of like to see, similar to the proposal of I was thinking more of an elementary school there. To alleviate some of that, I'm thinking Hamilton, to help cause some of our enrollment issues at North Woods, that would become a charter school, like one of the proposals says, where we would leave IB there, and possibly a non-boundary, but it could be a boundary school, but then also have our SOTA students there as well.
So just to clarify, Northwoods becomes the charter,
Yep.
not.
Did I say no?
No, I just want to be super clear, so we're.
Oh, yep,
the notes are
North
happening.
Woods.
Yep, okay, keep going.
So that's kind of was the thought of that. As far as administration, I know we need to have a group of certain offices that probably need to stay intact. But I think we could find that in other of our buildings, and abandon this site. We've got to abandon some of one site or not. We can't hang on to property hoping that things are going to change and things. So I would abandon this site. And as far as some of the discussion around Emerson, we're actually, if we close Emerson, we're actually putting $250,000 back into costs, because that'll cost that much to bus kids. And that increases 5% each year. So, and then that would also kind of leave the, like you were talking, Jeff, leave the, the north feeder schools into those areas.
So your proposal is to, is this an additional option?
You probably.
It sounds a lot like
It's very
Jeff's,
similar.
but it is to consolidate into a new building at Spence,
Right.
and then Hamilton remains, but becomes a boundary school, and Soda moves to Northwoods, and Northwoods becomes the charter location, so the boundary. So.
And Hamilton that school was, I'm so old that I know that we talked about closing Hamilton and Emerson and then building a building here, and then that didn't go over. And then Hamilton was, kind of the school that was really struggling. Well, Boys and Girls Club just put a lot of money, and we put a lot of money into that facility, and that neighborhood needs that school. If that school goes away to Spence, we're not doing our constituents well, we're not doing our neighborhood well, we're not doing our city well, we're not doing our district well. So that school needs to stay. But I think it could be more absorbing some of the students at Spence, at least for the time, not permanently, but at least for the time being, as we ask our voters if they would consolidate a building build a building on the Spence site. We can't be closing an elementary school that was built 30 years ago and ask our voters to build another new school. That's
You mean Northwoods?
right. We can't be closing Northwoods and then asking voters to build a new school on the south side. Wherever. I'm not trying to get the south side thing going, but.
So, yeah, I don't want to get into the north side, south side battle, right?
Well, and then the other thing with this site, the way I've read it is, this building, as far as I think I read it, needs $5.5 million of eventual, and some of that's calling to roost pretty soon, because the boiler here is about ready to go. A lot of us remember freezing a couple meetings ago. But I'd rather put $5 million into a building that's gonna teach kids or have kids than have a building, like this, where we actually have other buildings, so we could abandon this building, and then we won't have to worry about the historic designation. Those are some of my thoughts.
Dr. Engel, will you do some math on some of those? Do you have what you need from?
So with Spence, it would be combining Hinchin and Spence ultimately? With
I would think some boundaries would have to, some of the pockets you were talking about, the islands.
And then a potential charter at Northwoods with some of those
Correct.
schools. Anything else as a part of that?
Closing Hogan.
Okay, excellent.
So that
Well,
would
we'd have
include
to-
a cost.
We'd have to put it in some of the capacity of the buildings that we have spaces, and I know that's gonna cost potentially $500,000, but that's better than $5.5 million for a building here to have administrators in a building. I'd rather have them.
I would be really wary of diffusing Hogan's services across multiple sites.
Correct.
I
That's
think
gotta be done, that's gotta be done. I didn't say like every,
Right.
We've gotta think strategically
Right.
about, and the main core has to be and can't go out to Northwoods or
Right.
whatever, but we can, I think, think strategically and not.
Yeah, I agree.
But we would
with
have to
that.
have, really consider which offices would have to be close to one another so they're functional.
Okay, what I want to do, I guess I'd like to look at some of these options that we have, and maybe we look at number 7, because number 7 was a super stretch. So while Dr. Engel is doing the math for us, so we can talk about the other ones that were proposed tonight. I guess just in terms of preparing for our next meeting and preparing for the ultimate, whatever we vote on as the decision. I'd like to, if possible, remove options from the table tonight. If we are ready, we remove the do nothing. Good job, everybody. I want to look at number 7 because this one deviates quite a bit from the others. So I wanted to give it time for board members to look at it. This is the one that would most balance socioeconomics in the schools, the demographics in the schools, by creating horizontal boundary strips. This is one that I personally have struggled with, just in the layout and how people would get to schools. I think the end goal is wonderful, but I worry about the size of the student body in the schools and where those boundaries fall. This one, to me, would be a candidate to consider for removing from discussion, but if there are board members who like it, we can keep it tabled, but this is just me trying to dispose of options.
What I don't like about number 7 in particular is it feels reactionary, just pulling into ourselves, and there doesn't seem to be anything creative or necessary about it to me.
I'd move to remove it.
I'd second that.
Well, we have a motion on the table. We have a motion by Ms. Sukla and a second by Dr. Sprague to remove option number 7 from discussion. So we'll do
For the public, do we want to read what it?
Yes. Option number 7 would create horizontal boundaries by closing, so in 2024, closing Spence, closing Summit, Northwoods would become a charter school, Hinchin becomes a 4K center. In the first year, this would save $2.4 million of operating expenses. By 2028, Hinchin, the 4K center, would close, which would reduce the total expenses by $3.3 million. So the motion on the table is to remove option 7 from discussion. Can we get a roll call vote on that?
Ms. Bergwald?
Yay.
Dr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye.
Mr. Newmeister?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Dr. Sprague?
Aye.
Ms. Sukla?
Aye.
Ms. Baumann?
Aye. Great. So in the interest of time, are we needing to review the additional information that Dr. Engel provided, or do we want to delve deeper into any of these options for discussion? And if there's a board member that would like to begin a certain option, or if there's a desire at the table to look together at the RFI included on this board docs, we can do that.
Could I ask a question, please?
Yep.
And I apologize, I got kicked off again, so that's why I'm on my phone. However, I seem to get kicked off a lot of things. But this one I have the question. I don't know whatever happened to the do everything because I got out of it, and I just want to make one thing clear that I'm not saying that's even an option or am I for it. I just thought it might be nice to know the total price of that, so we could always tell people this is what we found and that isn't even in the ballpark. So that was my only reasoning behind. I think it did bring up some, if nothing else, it brought up some ways to look at why we are looking at the other options.
Yeah, that one's just tabled for now. So we'll have it as a piece of the discussion until we vote to remove it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I guess one of my questions about several of these courses of action is that they're looking down 3 and 4 years from now and proposing closing school sites that we haven't talked about at all and that the community's had no input on at all. So I'm not sure how I feel.
On the potential courses of action provided to us at the last meeting, I'm just looking at Polly because that's the one that's kind of a hot one here. That one's referenced in potential action number 2, 3.
No, I mean the
4.
ones in 2, 3, and 4. I'm
Okay.
saying like no one from Poly has been up here talking about their school and what's important about it, or Summit. Some of these are like, and then we'll close Summit in 2028, and then none of that has been really part. Some of these seem to go further than what we're thinking about doing right now. Not just the 2 schools we might, the 2 school decision we've been thinking we're facing to try to get the budget balanced. These are going down into 3 and 4 schools and moving more things, and that just seems maybe.
So this is how I'm thinking. If I'm wrong, I'd like to hear, it probably is, but I just kind of want, I'm thinking that by the end of February, we've got to make a decision on which, if any, schools are closing for the next school year. I think the big picture idea I threw out, the big picture idea that Jeff threw out, those would be up for referendum probably this fall, which means we'd have to take some action late summer. But that gives us a lot of time to look at, because a lot of what I presented is, I think that would work, maybe it would work, and maybe not. And so I think you're exactly right, Dr. Garcia. I think it's really fair that we if Polly is part of the conversation, we need them to talk to us. The hearing from the other elementary schools that were part of the FAC proposal was, all of us agree, hearing from all the public input was extremely valuable to all of us.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't want to miss that opportunity for other buildings. And so I think the decision that has to happen by the end of next month is which, if any, schools are closing, and then from there, what else are we going to do about facility planning and making the budget work?
I guess one of the things when I was talking with Dr. Engel about how to look at the problem was, one of my worries was, it feels like as a board member, it's hard to see, I'm making a choice and it's then this, then this, then this.
Yeah.
Where because this has been so emotional, the problem that's immediately in front of us of how do we get to next year feels like the biggest decision.
Agreed.
And so we kind of talked a little bit about the board potentially voting on one decision and then saying, and other things will close, and then the next decision comes. What Dr. Engel needed from the board was pathways so that looking at savings over time, he could present the board with a balanced budget. Correct? Is that kind of the gist of that conversation?
That's correct. If the board decided to take care of $1 million of expenses, that would leave a $2.5 million budget deficit for next year. If there was no other decisions involved, I wouldn't know that is going to be addressed in the future.
Right.
I would be obligated to present the board a balanced budget. I can't do that with the board's direction with one-time things.
Right.
And so I need to ensure that I'm being financially responsible for the future. And so I would be obligated to provide a balanced budget, and those decisions to take care of people properly happen in March. We can wait until July and have layoffs, but that's miserable. And so having some knowledge of the future and the plans that are in place, and even if it's dependent on a referendum or this board commits to something and the next board changes it, that's fine. But I need some certainty in order to provide the board with a balanced budget for the following year that isn't just temporary things.
Would that include, I guess the picture, again, I'm thinking, as has been said, these are going to, you don't just do a referendum in fall and assuming it passes, next school year you build the building, and it doesn't work. There's layers upon layers of steps. And so I guess the assumption that I've been making is we may have to look at our reserve account to tide us over, some part of it to tide us over till we get to those savings so we can replenish that reserve account. That was,
But-
I guess, an assumption I was making, but maybe I should vocalize that.
But the reserve account is also obligated by policy to be at a certain amount unless we have a clear plan.
And
Am
we
I
are,
correct
we
in
are
that?
in excess somewhat of what we have to have, but it's our own policy, so we can adjust our policy
We
as
could
we
change
need
it,
to.
but-
Again, I wouldn't do it lightly without a long-term plan and replenishment.
Dr. Angus, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so, one of the things I laid out as I developed the courses of action was, the outcome of each of these is the reduction of at least 2 elementaries and the reduction of at least $3 million in expenses by 2028, so 5 years out there, to address structural deficits and provide the best instructional environment for students. For me, if structural deficits are known to be addressed within 5 years or 2028, then temporary deficits may be responsibly covered through available short-term strategies. And so that's what I'm using as an assumption in this process, is if there's a pathway to reducing these structural deficits by $3 million, and we can talk about other long-term strategies, of course. But if that's there, then there's a strategy to get through 4 years that doesn't materially impact our staff and our students. It might involve some fund balance, and that's a discussion we can have. There's some other strategies
Sure.
where we can delay some payments. But at the end of the day, if we don't have that path forward, then I can't responsibly not look at structural changes to our budget.
Fair enough.
So those assumptions are correct. Ms. Barkadal, you're shaking your head. Are you needing more information? Or do you want to spend more time looking through the options?
I just don't feel like I'm even close to saying this is what I want to happen. And I don't know that it's for lack of information. It's just this is a really crappy decision to make. It sucks.
Yeah, I agree.
I think we're focusing still, and I know why we're doing it. We'll continue to focus on our expenses and how to balance the budget via expenses, because it's what we can control, right? It's a lever that we can control pretty definitively. But the other lever, which we've talked about before, is how do we continue to retain students? How do we keep people within the district? I mean, we netted out 90-some students that we lost this year. That's almost triple what we lost the year before. That was definitely higher than normal. So that loss of students is another area that we just need to be cognizant as we go through this process. And I appreciate both Juan and Brad bringing up making sure that everybody's at the table as we talk through this. I mean, to me, it's we have to keep the human side of what it is and make sure people have their voice as we go through it. But I think that we also need to focus on what are we doing for retention, because that's our revenue. That's how we're funding the district. That's how we're keeping people going. That's how we're keeping our teachers and everybody here. If we could pull in 30 of those students that we lost last year, what's that equal in revenue, right? I think there should be goals we should be setting as we go through this. Dr. Sprague, like we talked about, is changing that tone. We want to do things differently. We want to pull the levers we can. We want to talk about the vision. But that vision includes how are we retaining students. And what I've learned as a shoulder parent, and that's probably how I describe myself before being a school board member, is my wife was mostly the engaged parent with my children. I've learned that we do a lot of amazing things. And that's not communicated. That's not the way the communities around see us. It's very apparent when somebody moves to our area and we are not first on the list. We should be. We have the most opportunities in the area out of any district. That's what I've learned. So I'm happily keeping my children within the district because of those opportunities. But I think that's the tone we have to set, and how do we focus on that? And I know that's a big topic. It's kind of extraneous as we talk about these levers which we can control, but I think we also should be saying, okay, how do I pull 30 of those kids back into the district? or recruit 30 more? You know, are these plans we're setting us up not only just from a budgetary standpoint, because that's critical, but also, are we setting ourselves up to continue to retain and recruit people into our district?
I guess with those comments, are there options that we have on the table that you believe don't do that?
I mean, to me, it depends on how we talk about these options.
Sure. I mean,
Right.
and I'm gonna be a taskmaster, because we
Yep.
have to keep to the time, we gotta keep to the goals, right? You know, February comes fast.
It does, and I'm okay with going, to me, I would rather just walk through each one of these options and test the waters with everybody, because
Talk
otherwise we're
about
gonna
each.
continue to come up with new plans that are kind of similar, and so I would, to me,
Well,
I
let's
propose
start
in
with-
going from top to bottom.
Let's start with option 2.
Okay,
And just start talking about, and we could talk about our feelings related to it, but I want it to be constructive, like,
I feel like you're looking at me there.
well, I'm looking at everybody, and I'm a feelings person, and I feel feelings real hard, so, but that, and it's a challenge, because I am also the taskmaster of the group, so, let's talk about number 2.
Mhm.
So, for those listening or in the,
Could we maybe have, you're the chair, but could we maybe talk about this more broadly? Like, it seems like there's lots of options with lots of different details that could go lots of different ways that are all have merit and all have risk. But I think what's really on the table is the board interested in closing schools before the next school year? Is the board interested in pursuing an operating or a capital referendum for new buildings? Are there some big things we could gel around
Agree on.
to? We can go through all each one if we want to, but I think maybe the big ones are those, and if we could gel around those, we might be able to synthesize more into the details.
I guess I'd turn it over to the board on that. Do you prefer to look at each of the remaining options, number 2 through number 6? Or do you want to try to come to an agreement around, and that would eliminate options, right? Like if everybody was like, I only want to consider options with the referendum, then that would remove other options from discussion. If we're not feeling ready to do that, we can go through the list.
But that might not be as clear as we think either, because at least from what I've heard tonight, some of us might not want to go for a referendum to ask taxpayers to pay for a new building if we're closing a new building. So like
Okay.
if that was, you know what I
Let's,
mean?
why don't we
That's
just
fair.
go through the options?
Okay, fair enough.
See how it goes.
And am I right in understanding the referendum option doesn't resolve your issue of needing to present a balanced budget to us? Because you usually give that to us in like October, and the referendum would be in November. Like, that's the problem where,
It would be enough of a certainty as a building referendum a year out. It wouldn't be functionally different than that. It would be a pathway.
okay.
Can I ask like a real left-wing question? Maybe not left-wing,
Out of,
out of,
Out there.
whatever.
You're out of pocket.
Thank you,
Out of
out of pocket. How much are we spending on vouchers, and how confident are we that that will continue?
You mean under our like state,
Mhm.
current state operations?
Vouchers function as a pass-through. So there's a expense that comes to us from the voucher schools, and then we are able to incur a revenue by levying more money. So the majority of the voucher expense doesn't materially impact our operations on a day-to-day basis. There is some general purpose revenue that comes to the state that is used for the original voucher programs in Racine and Milwaukee that does impact us, but that hasn't been the strategy that the state legislatures used lately. It's been more this pass-through of local communities bearing the burden of the vouchers that happen in their community. And so if vouchers expand substantially for some reason, it wouldn't necessarily mean less revenue for the school district or more expense. It would just be the taxpayers would be paying more and more and more for private school kids.
but isn't there a knock-on effect? Let's say that scenario comes true and vouchers expand significantly. part of the knock-on effect is that we are losing revenue because students are, in our boundaries, are choosing to go to private schools instead of attend our
True,
public
if they were our
schools.
students.
I mean, there's not so many areas that they could otherwise be coming from.
Sometimes, like, people set up foreign exchange programs.
Oh,
It
sure,
could be,
okay.
you know, kids are moving into our school district, and they're
By
never
and
with us.
by and large, we're talking about kids in our communities.
Yeah, as an example, at Aquinas, they had, you know, substantial declining enrollment until the voucher program got involved, and then it's been flat since. And they've even seen minor declining enrollment even there, the school in our community. You know, there's also Luther and Cooley Christian and some Providence and some others, but they've had the same declining enrollment, if not worse, that we've had.
What is it, 1.7 million?
I think it was 1.7 this year.
Is that included? It's on the budget line item. You've got is that our open enrollments from public to public?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep, open enrollment is our public to public, where we get just pass $8,000 back and forth.
Yep.
There's 2 line items that have open enrollment on it. One that has like open enrollment with a bunch of other stuff, and then one where it stands alone. Wish I had the budget open.
Ms. Spring will look into that while we go through the courses of action one by one.
So we're on number 2. Number 2, if you look up at the screen, or if you have any documents in front of you, I find it helpful to look at the map. Number 2 is the Facility Advisory Committee recommendation, which was looking at locating our elementary schools ultimately where more students tend to live. The proposal was to close Northwoods, close Hinchin, and then Polytechnic to Central was added after the FAC completed their work. So that was not part of their recommendation, but that is part of cost savings in this option. Discussion on number 2.
I just want us, I'm not saying I'm in favor of number 2, but I just want us to pay attention to possible bias against this one based on the community reaction to the Facility Advisory Committee and some of our relationships with Northwoods. I think, I'm not making a statement, I just think that we need to make sure that we are not avoiding this one because we feel its unpopularity.
I think that's fair, and I think for full transparency, I'll note that my kindergartner goes to Northwoods. She's in Senora Hooper's kindergarten class, and my 2 middle school kids went through Northwoods too. So I think it's fair to note that, like, for certain board members, including me, this has been probably the most painful option.
Well, in all fairness, you've had to deal with personally the closing of Lincoln and then going to take your kids to school every day, and I don't know how you did it, so I really
It's
respect
true,
that.
but, you know, when you run for the board, you run for
It's the deal.
doing more than just what serves your own kids, so.
So, I'm not in favor of this one. One, I think it's been said numerous times about closing North. Again, I'm looking at a proposal where we'd ask for capital referendum to replace old buildings, and so closing a new one would really make that less likely and less successful in the community. The other thing is that there were, at the FAC, individuals who wanted to talk about options that we've brought up about building, and that was not allowed to be part of the discussion, and for appropriate reasons. That's not a negative statement. And members were, they had to vote which school to close. There were some that didn't want to vote, and they were all asked to vote. So in some ways, they came up with this in a different kind of constraint than what we're allowed to do our work in. And so my not supporting this is not a negative statement on about the work that they did. I attended many of those meetings, and everybody there worked hard. They did a lot of homework. They were very committed to the process, and so my not supporting this is not a reflection of that, but I think the constraints that they did their work in are just different than what we're doing our work in, and that's why I would come up with a different solution.
if I may.
Yep.
I agree with Deb wholeheartedly on this one. I am obviously not in favor of this as well. It's a beautiful school, a lot of wonderful land there, and I think it'd be a travesty to close this one. And I am in agreement also that I've heard from people that served on that committee that their hands were a little bit tied, and this was limited what they could and couldn't do. So I think all in all, we do have the opportunity to look at different avenues and different solutions. So I am with Deb on this. I definitely do not favor this one.
I would add a point in our, kind of in agreement in terms of our flexibility to make other choices. And I am not gonna pretend to have the command over the budgeting process that Jeff has, but as I was looking at things over the past few weeks, I find that, you know, for instance, the lowest projected savings option of closing Emerson and Spence was still 88% of the highest savings, and all of the plans were within 320,000 of each other. So that, to me, is manageable in terms of the differences, enough that while the financial considerations, I think, loom large, and rightfully so, and I agree, Annie, with your point that we need to be thinking about in terms of operation first and foremost. How are we educating students, and how are we able to maintain the level of education that we want? I think where our flexibility comes in is in some of those less quantitative considerations. What is this going to do to the community? What is this going to, who are the students and the families that this is going to impact? What kinds of additional effects in terms of added busing? Brad, like you brought up, do we need to make sure we're being mindful of? And the, not just in the cost of busing, but on the logistics for families, which we heard loud and clear in the high school referendum was a very real concern.
Other comments from board members on number 2 before we move on to number 3?
Just the polytech part that's moving the 6 through 12 into Central.
Yeah. So need a middle school kids in next week.
I think for the sake of argument, I would say the devil has enough advocates, but just, I've already started, so. The benefit, and this applies to both 2 and 3, just looking at the table, the benefit of each of those would be immediacy and the certainty that it gives Dr. Engel in his budget planning for the next few years, that the savings is all pretty much upfront.
Yeah, 2 and 3 do not require any dice rolling, right? And so if the board was very worried that options to consolidate through referendum wouldn't pass, like if we felt the climate in the community was one that would not support a building referendum for an elementary school, that would ultimately consolidate 2 schools. So there can be community members who wouldn't support it just based on that. 2 and 3 would be the options that would be like safe. Safe for the board, because they would have the immediate savings that we need. The changes would happen and we would be able to adjust and move on.
I feel like they're, as you said, good answers to address the capital or the operating needs now, but there isn't a future picture, and that's, I think whatever decision we make really needs to include some future planning around it.
I think it would be missing the opportunity if we didn't.
So I'm hearing moving into conversation of number 3 a little bit. Do we want to move on to number 3? Sure. Number 3 was considered by the Facility Advisory Committee. This is an option that would reduce deferred maintenance. So rather than prioritizing schools that are mostly located where students are living, this one looked more at the deferred maintenance, roughly related to the age of the buildings, and would all in 1 year in 2024 close Emerson, close Spence, and then this wasn't part of the FAC work, but Polytechnic would move to Central in the option presented. I'll pause for board comments.
And I would argue that the reduced expense would not be 3 million, it would be 2.8.
Would not be what?
3 million, 2.8, because you've got to add busing.
Can you tell us more about that? I was unaware that there was that.
If you close Emerson, it'll cause 3 busing,
3 new routes.
3 new routes to go to have bus them to Northwoods. And it's like $270,000 a year, forever and ever, plus 5% increase each year.
Why would they have to go to North?
In the,
Where would they go?
in the original
If we
exploration,
okay.
it was looking at the 4550 line and keeping kids north with their middle school students, and so
Okay.
closing Emerson would involve combining those
I understand.
attendance boundaries with Summit, Northside, Northwoods, at least a bus route to each. You could look at split boundaries and go to Hamilton, Spence, State. It would involve less busing, but probably still busing, given the distances to State, and Spence is probably within the 2 miles, but some students might qualify. So there might be less going south and creating a mixed middle school boundary, but as it was proposed, it would be at least 3 bus routes, $200,000-ish.
So the bus routes are really about aligning the middle schools with the high schools?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you,
Yep.
that's helpful to understand.
I will say that this one I struggle with because the number of students who would have to bus would be significant. While the cost in this doesn't necessarily feel like so great to make it something that I wouldn't consider. It just seems like an option that would be logistically very hard for the 2 communities, this grouping of families and students in neighborhoods where there are accessible schools. We definitely heard during the high school referendum attempt that neighborhood schools were what people wanted. So, and I'll just say, like, through the whole FAC process, my personal connection to Northwoods, the struggles have been like, I didn't like any of the options. I didn't feel like any of them were great, which is why I appreciate that we have the chance to look at some of these more future-looking, hopeful options. But I'll turn it over to board members, and if Juan or Scott want to raise their hand and say anything, they can.
At this point, I think I've shared as much as on my mind regarding this.
I'm sorry, what was that? Can you repeat that?
Is that I think I have shared as much as is in my mind right now
Okay,
regarding this, but I appreciate the opportunity.
okay. Any other comments on number 3? Ms. Berkedal, you look like you were about to speak, sorry.
I must have a real telling face. I actually like the idea of combining Emerson and Spence at Hogan, and don't share the concern about the kids being split then for middle school. I went to State Road in Lincoln and was split both times, and just opportunities to meet more kids each time. I'm very extroverted though, so.
Yeah, I've been wanting to kind of weigh in on the impacts on students and going with their friends. I lost my best friend to Southern Bluffs when they built it, and then didn't meet him again until 6th grade at Longfellow. And my friends that went up to Logan because they lived on the northern end of the south side of La Crosse, there are impacts. I mean, that's for sure, but I think I guess I question how much I can weigh that against some of the more pressing concerns, and that there are going to be splits, there are going to be changes in where people go. And in some sense, ultimately, those are temporary.
This might be a good place for our student reps to weigh in, given you've maybe experienced this personally or know others that have. I'd be curious.
Personally, I have not had much experience in splitting away from my friends. I went to Northwoods, and I have been with the exact same group of kids up through, and I went through the IB program and the Spanish immersion program, so I was with the exact same group of people up through middle school. And it was a great experience, but I don't have that experience to say that it might have been worse if I had split away from them, because they could have had benefits as well.
I also personally am not had to go through the experience of splitting away from friends, but I have several friends who went to Lincoln for middle school and then had to split off from a majority of their friends, which I know some people have struggled with just with forming new friends, but I think it's also, they also have seen their friend group grow, I guess, because they've been able to collaborate with both schools almost. And I think in today's age too, there's still social media and it's time outside of school to connect with friends who might just be a different school away too.
And it wouldn't be 5 kids going by themselves to a new school. There'd be 150 or 200 kids going together to one and the same going to another.
Yeah. And sometimes I think being in a class with friends too sometimes doesn't help learning wise sometimes too. I know personally sometimes I want to talk more with my friends than focus on the topic too, so.
I think that would help. I don't think either community would be, either school community, Emerson or Spence, would be happy to have their school closed by any shake of the imagination. But I think it could help to lessen the sting, to have a plan to build something new and really cool.
So we're talking about number 4 now. Let's talk about number 4 some more, because that's a great segue. Number 4, there's on the map and on the table are a little bit complicated and hard to read. What Ms. Berkedal was referring to is an option to consolidate Emerson and Spence into a brand new building. Number 4 looks at building at the Hogan site. Earlier board members talked about some of the struggles with the historic designation that is imminent for Hogan, should any decisions be made by this board to do anything with this site.
But that would be sorry.
No, go.
I feel like that would be less of a challenge if we were the developers of the property than if we were trying to sell to an external developer.
It doesn't, yes, but it increased costs significantly.
It could.
It could. I mean, there's fewer developers that handle historic renovations, as we've discovered.
My sense of things is if the community came together to pass a referendum to do a new build on this site, 62,000 people who have the opportunity to vote, it would, I don't think anyone could stand in the way of that politically.
I think that's.
I think it would be appropriate for us to make a plea to look at a lot of what we heard is why aren't we doing anything with Hogan? Why aren't we doing anything with Hogan? I think there's a lot of will for it. I think, yeah, there's a risk. I think for those who are deeply and honestly concerned about historic preservation in our community, we can find other creative ways of honoring Otto Merman, who now already has at least one building. So
Famed local architect.
I don't want to belittle the concerns for historic. I don't want to belittle the concerns for historic preservation. I think there's an extent to which it prevents us from doing the things that the community wants us to do with our school district, to have the best facilities, to offer the best programs for our kids, and I want people to understand that. We can have the Otto Merman Auditorium, or the architecture school, or
Yeah. Other comments on number 4? I should note there is an option on here that is a referendum to consolidate Hinchin with Hamilton and State Road through additions. And then in the future, so whether that option is part of it, the discussion or not, that 2028, in order to have the savings of consolidating 2 buildings into one operationally, another building would have to close. And that's why in 2028, you see 3 other buildings potentially identified that the board would have to decide to close.
So, I like number 4 better than 2 or 3 because it's forward-thinking. Brad said it better than I could, in terms of Hamilton is a vital resource in that neighborhood, and we, as a local part of government, need to keep that vital resource in that neighborhood. So I would not support removing that school from that neighborhood. And quite frankly, this proposal also includes looking at future schools, but I think we also need to continue to follow what is the enrollment. Again, I keep harping at this, but what is really driving that big increase in declining enrollment the last few years? If we've got to figure out what that is and figure out if it's something we can change or we have to live with. And before I would be willing to look at closing additional schools or consolidating other schools. And the only reason I say that is that we've seen declining enrollment, period. There's a birth rate that's declining, period. We've seen that, and so we know that, but the last 5 years have been at a much accelerated rate, and if it's going to continue at that rate, then, and there's nothing we can do about it, we need to know about it. If there's something we can do to slow it down or be aware of, or we see possible changes, that accelerated rate what makes me nervous and makes me concerned for the future in terms of where that's going, because it is a fairly new incident.
Other comments on number 4 before we move on to number 5? And I don't want to cut off any discussion.
Just a clarification on the 2028 part of number 4. It would be Hinchin or Hinchin or Summit or Northwoods. And does the minus 1 million mean that would bring an additional million? Like, how does that compute into the $3 million total underneath?
It's the 2 plus the 1.
It's added to the year before.
Oh, so each one of those would result in another $1 million. Got it. Thank you.
Okay, number 5. Number 5 is another referendum option, and we've got 2 minutes before we're going to have our public speakers come and speak with us. We can look quickly at number 5 or number 6. I guess we'll just look quickly at number 5 before our speakers come up.
Can I ask one more question about number 4?
Yep.
So if we didn't hold on to Emerson to move the administration center over there and found a different option for that, would we still need to offload another elementary school?
Should we repeat that? I apologize.
So the 2028 part includes having the administrative center in the Emerson building. If we didn't do that, if we just found a different plan for the administrative building, would we still need to reduce elementary schools by 1 more?
We would, wherever Hogan's at, it'll cost money to move, it won't save money. The savings from closing a building come from all the support staff that support that operation and some efficiencies with teaching staff.
But if we held on to Emerson, then we'd be on the hook for the $3 million of maintenance that's coming for it down the road?
Yeah, it's a net win because it's better than Hogan, you know, in terms of deferred maintenance and probably a better constructed building at this point. Foundation at Emerson's 39, foundation here is 1898. You know, so there would be a net improvement by 40-ish years moving into Emerson in terms of the lifetime of that building. It's just a thought to keep
Yeah.
an educational building in that neighborhood.
I think it would send a confusing message to voters if we were closing a building and asking, because we're saying it's old, and asking them to invest in a new building, but then holding on to the old one. You know what I mean? Like,
Certainly.
I don't know.
The building in our inventory as opposed to trying to find a new space for folks. You know, so it's just a way to think about lowering costs long-term.
Thank you. Sorry.
We've reached 8 o'clock. That's totally cool. We'll just pick up 5 and 6 next week, and then the additional options that were presented tonight. Any other requests for information? Please email either me or Dr. Engel with the options we have left or the options presented. I believe Dr. Engel was editing was it the course of action?
The RFI's plan.
On the RFI's document, the options that were requested for additional information, Dr. Engel has been doing math, and there's some new math in there to look at that, so when we come back in February, we will be able to look at that more closely. Thank you for the great discussion. All right, we will move into public speakers. We have 2 tonight. So I'll read my little brief and then I'll turn it over to our first speaker. So it is the policy of the board to provide at its public meetings an opportunity for individuals to address the board. Comments about individual staff or personnel will not be allowed. Open meeting law prohibits the board from engaging in discussion or responding to matters not included on the agenda. All speakers are reminded that this same policy limits your time to speak to 5 minutes. This limit will be strictly enforced. May I ask the superintendent to keep track of the time and to notify the speaker when time is running out?
I will do so.
You are also asked to give your name and the school district where you reside at the beginning of your time for the public record. Our first speaker tonight is Laura Eber.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Laura Eber, and I reside in the school district of La Crosse. I'm a parent of 2 current students here, one in middle school and one in high school, and then a third that is in college. Thank you again for allowing me to talk to all of you here. I'm here again as many community members and parents are unaware of so many opportunities that the students have available. Many board members have mentioned for a while that the district is not transparent and doesn't communicate with the community. I think we can do better. At the last board meeting, I handed out a list of opportunities that students at all levels in the district may participate in. The list didn't include everything, such as the Health Science Academy, the Engineering Academy, and the Construction Academy for 11th and 12th graders. Those academies have helped students to affirm that they want a career in those respective areas, and some wishing to pursue interests in other areas because that wasn't ideally for them. So they found that out, and in turn, that saved them time and money in the future for their families as well. So that's a unique opportunity that I think our school district offers, that many of those of us who are aware of those opportunities love. But again, there are so many parents and community members that have no idea they're available. I'm not only bringing up the great things that our district offers just to put on your to-do list. So I'm talking to you because I'm willing to help with solutions. I'm willing to help with creating more positive perceptions of the school district. I want to help. So the school district, schools are a business to educate students, to help prepare them for the future. Well, just like any other business, I think it's critical for the school district to also market themselves out to the community, to the whole, so that everybody knows what's going on in a positive aspect. We're here to help plan for and prepare for our future, right? And the youth are our future. So I gave you a list of some ideas that I've compiled with talking to friends and other members of the community. So a few things I'll address. Keeping in mind that some of these that I have, it wouldn't necessarily be to add on to teachers' roles or duties. It would be to help and implement other things. So one, could you reevaluate the marketing budget? I don't know what it is, but are there enough funds to promote a school district of this size? Do we have enough public relations people working in our district? It's a lot for one person to handle. If approached, would the La Crosse Promise Center, would they have a couple of students that might want to go into marketing and business that could maybe do an internship part-time? Would it be possible to get interns from the local colleges or universities in the area to maybe work part-time or full-time? Looking at some of those potentials, that would be a great opportunity to get the word out to the public. A couple other ideas involve showcasing students in clubs, organizations, or even classes within the district. For example, the FBLA groups and marketing classes. If approached, would their teachers perhaps make one of their projects be something that would involve advertising and showing off the strengths of the school district? Some of these could even be shared on YouTube. So the film club and photography club or video classes, could they be approached to perhaps come up with a video? Those could be placed right on the school district website, maybe on YouTube, or put out for a press release. I think utilizing the different groups, including the Polytech students, and showcasing their work would be a perfect example of promoting what the school district offers and how the students are being prepared for life beyond high school. The students would gain real life experiences and walk away with pride. The projects could, in fact, be added to their portfolios and also to applications. I hope you see that I'm addressing an important issue that's positive and hopefully for realistic changes that could be addressed to get investment in the community. If you'd like to talk to me further, I did write out my information, my contact information on the bottom of those sheets, and I welcome any discussion afterwards. Thank you again.
Thank you. Our next speaker tonight is Linda Heelman. Oh, it's not on here? Do I have a different agenda? What's that? Oh, mine show, am I on the wrong day? Danielle Dummel, will you please come to the podium? Thank you. I think I clicked on to look at last week's documents. Just get back in.
See what you did there. You didn't want me to come up and speak, did you? Can't get rid of me that fast. My name's Danielle Dummel. I reside in the school district of La Crosse. I have 2 kids that go to Northwoods. I'm here representing the Northwoods community. I'm going to try and keep this short and sweet. I just wanted to hand out a petition our community started back in September. We have about 740 signatures on it to date. The URL is on the top there, and I printed out some of the comments that were left on the petition for you guys to review. So do with it what you will. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I'm on the right day now, sorry. That concludes our public speakers. We will move on to the superintendent's consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the items on the superintendent's consent agenda as presented.
Second.
So the consent agenda is a mechanism used by the board to deal with routine business that must come before the body. We have a motion by Mr. Korberg and a second by Ms. Berkedal to approve the items as presented, and we'll do a roll call vote unless there are items that board members want to remove. Okay.
Ms. Berkedal? Aye. Dr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Newmeister?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Dr. Sprague?
Aye.
Ms. Sukla?
Aye.
Ms. Baumann?
Aye. Moving on to the board consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the items on the board consent agenda as presented.
Second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Korberg and a second by Ms. Sukla. We'll approve the items as presented unless there are items that board members want to remove. Otherwise, we'll go into a roll call vote.
Ms. Berkedal?
Aye.
Dr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Newmeister?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Dr. Sprague?
Aye.
Ms. Sukla?
Aye.
Ms. Baumann?
Aye. All right, we have one,
I have a question. As the policy has changed, will we be getting updates on the interpretation from administration for monitoring that policy?
Yes, that will come next. Now that that policy is approved, we'll update interpretations and monitoring reports and bring those
I
back
just
to
want
the
to make sure I
board.
understand the process. Thank you.
Yep.
so tonight we have one matter reserved for board action, and it's the open enrollment seats for 24-25.
I'll make a motion to approve the 2024-25 unlimited regular and special education enrollment seats with the exception of deaf and hard of hearing services and American Sign Language educational interpreting services.
Second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Korberg and a second by Ms. Sukla, and we can pause for discussion if needed. No discussion, we'll do a roll call vote.
Ms. Berkedal?
Aye.
Dr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Newmeister?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Dr. Sprague?
Aye.
Ms. Sukla?
Aye.
Ms. Baumann?
Aye. All right, so our information item tonight is the quarterly budget report. Yeah.
I have a 8.02 on my agenda for board action and policy approval for the second and final reading of OE4.
That was on the consent agenda.
I have it on matters reserved for board action.
I think it was.
I had it as a duplicate item. We put it underneath the board consent agenda.
Okay.
Dr. Engel, do you want to present this?
Certainly. Quarterly budget report, this is something that Ms. Sprang prepares for us, and you'll see a budget report monthly, but Ms. Sprang prepares an opportunity for us to talk about it quarterly to kind of go over the financials, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Sprang.
Sure. So, as Dr. Engel said, this is a report that we talk about on a quarterly basis. When I brought the monthly report to you last month, I was asked to provide a summary. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to kind of teach you how to look at our financials on a monthly basis, so that when they do come up and you have questions, that's when we would like you to, address those. So looking at this on a quarterly basis, we are looking, first of all, at our total revenues and expenditures compared to last year. And they're very comparable at the total amounts. We know we're pretty much on the same track as the prior year. And we feel very comfortable with that because we know in this district that our revenues do not come in on a regular basis. There are certain months where we have more revenues or more expenditures. So as you can see, our revenues and our expenditure totals and percentages are very comparable year to year. I did put a note on that the expenditure totals and percentages are by program and by type, and they'll always be the same. It's just broken down differently to give you different information. The function is the purpose. Is it an instructional expense or is it a support expense, like a non-instructional expense? The type breaks it down even further to salaries, to benefits, our purchase services.
Just so I'm clear, so we've raised 16.6% of our projected revenue, and we've spent 36.5% of our projected budget.
Correct. and that is very normal at this time of year because our municipal tax money does not come in until January. And that is why that's the importance of that fund balance, so that we can use those dollars to operate, pay people until we get our revenue in. The step 2, then we go line by line and we look at comparability. So one thing to note about this, that the percentages are the amount of revenue of the budget taken in at this certain time of the year, and the expenditures are a percent of the budget that we've expended. So if we change the budget from year to year, those percentages will change also and could be maybe non-comparable at those levels. So the revenues, I broke it down a little bit for you. So the local taxes, and those include mobile home fees. Mobile home fees are sporadic. They don't come in at the same time every year from every municipality. And then, of course, like I said, the first installment for municipal taxes does not come until January. Our fees, admissions, sales, those happen at different times through the years, so they will vary from month to month and year to year. Interest rates are higher this year than they were a year ago, but the interest revenue budget also increased, so the percent of budget is not comparable. The AGR, this is the achievement gap. Help me out here, Dr. Engel.
Achievement gap reduction.
Right, there you go. That is, and the state aid are revenues that are scheduled payments from the state, and they come same time every year in different months during the year. So open enrollment and computer aid are not received until June, and actually that computer aid is not received until July from the Department of Revenue, but we book it as a receivable in June, so it's a revenue of this fiscal year. Open enrollment, no, most of the federal and state grants are reimbursable grants. We've talked about that before. We need to spend those dollars before we can submit it for a claim to be reimbursed. And then the detailed expenditures review, so I have no concerns about them. The vocational education includes the new agricultural program. Expenditures also reflect the Carl Perkins reimbursable grant expenditures. Summer school expenditures also include intercession expenditures at Northside. And then the non-employee insurance includes things like our property liability, auto, workers' comp, that type of expense. And so the detail type expenditure revenue, they match the function, the program revenue, expenditures, so those are just broken down in different ways. Is there any question about that?
Questions from board members?
Is the financial report that you presented, is that an accrual report or more of a cash-based report?
Cash-based.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. So the charts provide a visual summary of financial reports, and so I've had prior board members really appreciate the charts because it gives us a visual. So after the board report's broken down in different ways, the charts, as you can see with the cash flow, that our expenditures are higher at this time of year than our revenue, but then the two lines are pretty similar year to year. So we know we're on the same track. Then our operating revenues are broken down by those different colors of what we're expecting during the year, and then year to year comparison is very similar because those are our revenue sources at this time of year. The operating expenditures by program.
On the cash flow, that line graph with the orange and the blue lines, so for each month, is that cumulative? So like the November would be all the expense through November from July through November, so it's not just the November expense?
Right.
Okay, I just make, thanks.
So Operating expenditures, same thing, very comparable year to year. And our operating expenditures by type, same, very similar. And then the fund balance. So as you can see, in November, that's one of our toughest months because we don't have the revenue. In December, we get some of our state aid and we get some of our AGR aid. So that helps with the revenue for December. And then in January, you will see that that spikes up quite a bit because we start getting the revenue from the municipalities.
The fund balance, is that the unrestricted only? Is that include restricted and unrestricted?
All fund balance. Mhm.
Is November typically the lowest month each year?
Yeah, and then about April, May, it can dip down again.
Oh.
But now they have changed. We used to not get our dollars, our last aid payment, until July, and the legislature changed that a couple of years ago, and now we get all of our dollars by the end of June.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And the fund balance percent, so our policy requires an amount. I'm assuming that means that June 30th at the close of the year. It doesn't mean each month.
Correct.
Okay.
Mhm. Any other questions?
Not seeing any. Thank you, Ms. Gray. All right, we will move into our announcements. Ms. Birkenau, do you have any announcements tonight?
Mel covered it. The only other plug I'll add for the Grand Award Luncheon February 9th is that Confluence is playing at it, so we booked a gig for local high school bands.
Cool. I have no announcements tonight either. I don't think there's any other linkages scheduled in the near future. I checked the document this morning. It didn't look like any. Cool. One last comment on all of the strategic planning stuff. If you have other options, send them ahead of time, since by February, the next, we'll only have 2 meetings scheduled. If at all board members are like, we need more meetings or we need more information, let me know before we get to the end of February. Like, let me know before next meeting, because then we'll be able to fill space. So if that's something that's on your mind or on the horizon, like, let me know soon. That's it.
I just wanted to take some time to recognize some incredible art students in our school district. We have an opportunity to submit art to the Wisconsin State Education Convention every year, and some of our students were able to send some in. Ms. Lori Aschenbrenner takes care of some of those, and we had one from Lily Vu, which was a great drawing that showed perspective and shading. I really appreciated. Another one from Emily Ritter that really, I thought, captured some emotion and some maybe thinking about what was motivating this piece a lot. Another from Alex Pedersen. Just a stark contrast, I thought, in color and black and white, and really evoked some emotion as well. Another from Laurel Erickson, which I thought was very graphic and had lots of contrasting styles that I appreciated. And lastly, one from Bree Scholl, that really had some neat elements to it, and while you might not be able to see it from where you're at, it had some really cool texture and a mixed media approach that I thought really let it breathe and bring it to life. So it was awesome to have all of the attendees at the State Education Convention from school districts across the state seeing our students' artwork, and a great way to showcase the positive things we do here in La Crosse and that our students are recognized for.
Those are pretty cool. Okay, so moving on to agenda planning.
I'll make a motion to approve the February 5th, 2024 Board of Education agenda with any additions or corrections.
Second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Korberg and a second by Ms. Berkedal. Do we need to do a roll call since we have online? We'll do a roll call vote.
Ms. Berkedal?
Aye.
Dr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Newmeister?
Aye.
Okay, I was gonna say he's still with us, right? Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Dr. Sprague?
Aye.
Ms. Sukla?
Aye.
Ms. Baumann?
Aye. All right, moving on to board debriefing. And I can't remember whose turn it is, but I can lead it this time. So I guess I'll pose to the board the questions. What did we do well? What did not go well? In looking at the processes that we had today. What do we need to do to improve?
I feel like our conversations felt like positive movement against making a decision. I don't feel like we're there yet, but I feel like we made progress, so I appreciate what everyone did to prepare for tonight and bring ideas to the table.
Well, this is a really emotional, sensitive subject. I really appreciated, as Katie said, the positivity and also the very thoughtful and respectful comments by everyone. I think that there's been so much work done by so many people, and to perhaps not agree with all of it, it was done, I think, in a very thoughtful manner and a very respectful manner.
I appreciated the civil discussion, that we can listen to each other and may not eventually disagree, but I mean, it's good to hear other viewpoints. I appreciate that.
I agree with all that, and I also would commend President Baumann on trying to bring a sense of movement and order to the discussion as well.
It's tough.
It is tough, yeah. But I don't feel that you were stifling discussion at all. I think you were trying to synthesize what was happening into forward movement, and I appreciated that.
Thank you for saying that.
And I appreciate Dr. Engel's responsiveness to our questions and quick calculating of math and thorough answers to our questions. It helps us tremendously. So thank you.
Yeah, the RFI's document was a beast, but also very helpful in answering questions I think that were brought up in the last meeting. Thank you for that. All right, so we will adjourn into closed session next. The La Crosse Board of Education will consider a motion to move into closed session on Monday, January 22nd, 2024, immediately following the Board of Education meeting, Hogan Administrative Center, room 209, pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851C, for the purpose of considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, to wit, the superintendent's evaluation. Is there a motion to adjourn to closed session?
So moved.
Second.
So with a motion by Dr. Sprague, second by Mr. Korberg, we'll do a roll call vote.
Ms. Berkedal?
Aye.
Dr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Newmeister?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Dr. Sprague?
Aye.
Ms. Sukla?
Aye.
Ms. Baumann?
Aye. Right, we'll meet upstairs. Let's take a 5-minute break.